I was sitting on the hood of a car parked in front of license plate 128 when the door opened and they stepped out. She saw me, and her face lost color, her eyes couldn't meet mine, and she looked away as I slid off the hood of the car. He raised his hands in a protective gesture, and I said, "Don't worry, neither of you are worth wasting your time on." I walked to my car, got in, and drove away. It was a long story that led to this confrontation. I met Harry when his family moved in next door. He was 8, the same age as me, and was the only boy in the neighborhood. There were a few girls my age, but Harry and I were the only boys. We naturally gravitated toward each other, and by the end of 4th grade, we were as close as twin brothers. We played Little League baseball and soccer together at Pop Warner. I had his back, and he had mine. If you joked with Harry, you joked with me, and vice versa. We were inseparable all the way through high school. I met Helen when I was in 10th grade, and we started dating. By senior year, we were still together. Harry hooked up with Annabelle Spears, and they went on double dates with Helen and me. On prom night, Helen gave me her virginity in the next room, where Harry and Annabelle were doing the same thing. High school graduation separated us. Harry didn't want to go to college and went into the Navy. Annabelle called him all kinds of dirty words for running away and leaving her, but despite that, she said she would wait until he got a permanent duty station and then join him. Helen and I went to college. I to Eastern Michigan University, majoring in civil engineering, and Helen to the University of Michigan, majoring in information technology. The University of Michigan in Ann Arbor and the University of Michigan in IPS Salon were only a half-hour drive from each other, so Helen and I were able to maintain a more or less stable relationship. I say more or less because a couple of times, Helen canceled dates with me to go on a date with a guy she met at the U of M, but of course, she didn't tell me about it. I got this information from friends who also went to Michigan, and they also told me that she dated on the nights I didn't visit. One night, I arrived just in time to see her get into a car with some guy and drive away. I followed them to a restaurant on Ann Arbor Road, gave them 10 minutes to go inside and get settled, and then followed them. I found them in a booth on the back row, sitting side by side instead of across from each other. He had his arm around her, and she made no effort to push him away or move away and leave any distance between them. Luckily, there was a booth at the other end of the hall where I could sit, and Helen couldn't help but notice me. But it wasn't until the waitress asked what I would like to drink, and Helen heard my voice that she looked in my direction. I pretended to read the menu and didn't look directly at her, but I saw her eyes get big, and she suddenly pushed the guy's hand away and moved away from him. The look on his face when she did that clearly said, "What are you doing?" That look said that this wasn't the first time they were together or even the second or third time they'd been together long enough for him to feel comfortable putting his arms around her and know she didn't mind. I have no idea what they were talking about, but Helen kept glancing nervously in my direction, and I sat back and pretended not to notice her. I finished my meal, got up, and left without once letting Helen notice me looking at her, and then drove home. The next day was Friday, and Helen and I had a date planned for Friday night, dinner and a movie. That Friday night, I missed our date. I didn't call in to cancel, I just didn't go. I turned off my phone and settled in with a good book. Saturday, I went to a party at the Delta F house and had a great time. I met a dark-haired beauty named Robin. We danced a couple of times, and she gave me her number and asked me to call her on Sunday. I was head over heels in my books getting ready for Monday's class when the doorbell rang. I got up, walked to the door, looked through my telescope, and saw that it was Helen. I opened the door, and she squeezed past me, walked into the room, and then turned to me, saying, "Where have you been? Where were you Friday night? And why didn't you answer the phone?" I closed the door, turned to her, and asked, "Which question do you want me to answer first?" There were 3 questions. "Which one do you want me to answer first?" "Don't be nice, Rob." "What's going on?" "Okay, then. I'll answer them in the order I like. First, where I've been. Mostly here, although Saturday night I went to a frat party. Next is why I didn't answer the phone. That's easy. I didn't answer the phone because you didn't call. Of course, it's my fault since I'm the one who unplugged it. Next, where were you Friday night? I was here. I called for pizza and spent the evening reading a really good book. Why didn't you call me and let me know you weren't coming? I figured you already had something going on with your boyfriend. My boyfriend? What are you talking about, Rob? You are my boyfriend. Then who were you in love with at the restaurant Thursday night? He's just an acquaintance of mine, and we weren't in love with each other. Sitting next to you, hip to hip, you leaned against him, and he put his arm around you. Isn't that lovey-dovey? Then what would you call it? It doesn't mean anything, Rob. We're just friends. If you don't think you're doing something wrong, Helen, why didn't you get up and come over and say hello? How about asking me to join you, to introduce me to your friend, maybe sit down with me and have a few words before heading out on a date? Maybe you didn't do that because then he might wonder who I was, and you didn't want to tell him. Why didn't you get up and walk over if it bothered you so much? Because I wanted to see how you behaved, to see how I act. Why would you want to do that? Because I've had too many people tell me about how much you date when I'm not around. I've also been told that you've been seeing guys on the nights. You've had your dates with me blown off. So yeah, I wanted to see how you acted with another guy. You don't own me, Rob. Nowhere does it say we're in an exclusive relationship. I thought we did, Helen. I seem to remember giving you my class ring and a leather sweater as a sign that we weren't breaking up. A sweater with a letter, a ring? We're doing well. Come on, Rob, that's so high school. Maybe, but it happened in high school. And when we left high school, I don't remember you giving me those things back and saying we're done with school, so all bets are off. But that's okay, since you don't feel like it binds you, I guess I can look at it the same way. I met a nice girl at that party, and she gave me her phone number, so I guess I can call her now. Helen got a nasty look on her face and hissed, "Fine, go ahead." I don't care, and walked away. As she left, I thought about the fact that she didn't make excuses, didn't say she wouldn't do it again, and didn't try to convince me that I was her one and only. In her mind, she was no longer a schoolgirl, she was a grown woman now, and things had to be different. It wasn't easy to do since we had been together for so long, but it was better to find out what was on her mind now than later. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I had a bunch of homework, so it wasn't until Thursday that I was able to call Robin. We talked for a bit and then made a date for Friday night. I picked her up, we had dinner, and then instead of a movie, she decided she wanted to go to a party she knew about. The party was at an apartment in Belleville. We got there a little after 8, and wouldn't you know it, it was just meant to be. The first people I saw when we walked through the door were Helen and the guy she'd gone out with Thursday night. "Oh," said I. "What's the matter?" asked Robin. "Them," I said, pointing at Helen and the guy. "Do you know them?" "I know her." "Do you know Miss Piggy?" "Miss Piggy?" "That's her nickname." "Why? Does she have that nickname?" "She's a real pig, that's why. Someone labeled her Miss Piggy." "Are you sure she's a? What else would you call a girl who has a steady boyfriend she says she's going to marry and wastes her time with other guys when the guy isn't around? Are you sure you know that for sure? I mean, the part about the spread?" "No, to be honest, I don't know that personally, but I've heard it from a few guys who said they've had flirtations with her." "You didn't say how you know her." "I'm the guy she was going to marry until I caught her last Thursday with the guy she's standing with now." "Oh boy, are there going to be fireworks?" "No, she and I broke up on Sunday. Now we're officially toast." "What are the chances?" "I'd have heard from you if Thursday hadn't happened." "Almost none, but Thursday did happen, and we came here to have a good time. So, how about we get on with it?" She took my hand and led me across the room to introduce me to our host, Helen, who had been standing off to the side when we entered. She saw me and made a shocked expression on her face, shocked because she didn't expect to see me at a party like this, or because I caught her with a new boyfriend again. "I don't know." I ignored her as Robin led me to a tall man standing with a tall blonde woman. She introduced me to Gary and his wife, Eris, and we made small talk for a couple of minutes before Robin led me away to get us drinks. The basement had been turned into a rec room and was being used as a dance floor. Robin and I danced and drank. She introduced me to a few people, and I had a great time. Every time I noticed Helen, she looked at me with an expression on her face that I couldn't read. Around 11, Robin said it was time to leave because she had pressing business for Saturday. So, we saw our hosts off and said our goodbyes. As I was driving Robin home, she said, "Your ex seems to have spent a lot of time today looking in your direction." "Probably surprised to see me there," I replied. "No, I got the impression she was uncomfortable seeing you with another girl." "Girl tough, she's the one who made me end our relationship." "Maybe, but I don't think she's happy about it." "Maybe not, but she'll have to get used to it." "Does that mean I'll see you more often or that you'll start dating all the girls?" "I prefer to date one girl at a time." "I enjoyed your company tonight, and I'm going to ask you out again. As long as you don't turn me down, you'll be my only girl." "What if I'm not ready to hang out with one all the time?" "Then you'll say no when I ask, and I'll go find another girl to date. When she says no, I'll call you and see how things are going. If she still says no, I'll find a third girl. And repeat this process until I find one that never says no." "Well, I like your attitude, and I see the possibilities. So, maybe we'll give it a try. How about tomorrow night?" "Sounds good." I walked her to the door, said goodnight, and as I turned to leave, she asked me to wait a minute. I turned back to her, and she said, "I never kiss on the first date, but I guess there has to be a first time for everything," and she kissed me. "I'll see you tomorrow," she said as she left for the house. When I got home, Dad was still awake and told me that Helen had called and that she was upset. I told him it was too late and that I would do it in the morning. Out of habit, I slept late Saturday morning, and when I got up and headed to the kitchen for my first cup of coffee, Mom told me I should call Helen. "She's already called twice this morning." "Not until I've had my first cup of coffee." "Things aren't going well with you two?" "It's not just the two of us anymore." "Does she know about this?" "She should. She's the one who made the decision." At that moment, the phone rang. My mom answered it and said, "It's for you." "It's Helen." I picked up the phone and said, "Yes?" "Why didn't you call?" "It was too late to call when I got home last night, and I just got out of bed this morning." "That's not what I meant." "I mean, why didn't you call me last night to pick me up for our usual Friday night date? We talked it over last Sunday, Rob. You told me we weren't in an exclusive relationship and had decided to date others. I told you that if it was enough that you were dating others, then I would date you too, and you jumped out of the house." "That's not what I meant, Rob. You should have known that." "Don't give me that crap, Helen. You were already dating the clown I saw you with last Thursday." "I wasn't with him, Rob. I went to that party by myself, and he just happened to be there." "Sure, Helen, whatever you say. It doesn't make any difference. I'm starting to hear all sorts of things about you and what you did, like how you got the nickname Miss Piggied. I don't know what you've heard, Rob, but it's not true. Why wouldn't I believe it's true after I saw you with your buddy at the restaurant? And I won't believe you just happened to meet him at a party. He was standing too close to you and hugging you when I walked into the party. No, Helen, you're not interested in staying with just me, and I'm not interested in being one of many. I'd appreciate it if you'd give me back the ring and the sweater with the letter. I realize it's a little too high school for an adult like you, and it doesn't seem to mean anything to you. I'll see you later. Goodbye." That sounded pretty final. My mom said she decided that being my constant wasn't enough for her, and like I just said, I'm not interested in standing in line. I started keeping Robin's constant company while all this was going on. I was getting letters from Harry about every 2 weeks or so, telling me how things were going in his life. He graduated from camp and enrolled in special training. He was assigned to a Navy construction battalion, otherwise known as the Navy SEALs. He learned to build and destroy. He never asked about Annabelle, so when I wrote my response, I didn't mention Annabelle either. I wouldn't have, though. He wouldn't have liked hearing about what she was doing. He wasn't even a week in, and Annabelle was already courting some guy she'd met at a party. A month later, he was gone, and Annabelle started living with a guy she met at work. Another 3 months later, he was gone, and she started living with a black guy she met when he towed her car to the store when it broke down. I don't know for sure, but I heard he made her pull trains for a bunch of her friends at his apartment. Then Annabelle suddenly disappeared, and no one knew where she went, at least until I got a letter from Harry. He had finally finished his training and had been sent to Norwich as a permanent posting. As soon as he arrived there, he sent for Annabelle, and she went to see him. I wish you could come and be my best man, but we didn't have much time to get everything ready. The sooner we get this done, the sooner we can get on the list for housing on base. Poor bastard, I thought. The first time you go, she'll have some other guy between her legs before the sound of the door closing behind you even subsides. I was not short of money, as my grandparents had set up a college fund for me the day I was born. It had enough money in it to pay for college and rent an off-campus apartment if I wanted to. So at the beginning of my junior year, Robin and I moved in together, and I began to get a taste of what family life was like. I loved it. After living together for about 6 months, I started thinking about making it permanent. I still had the feeling that what Robin and I had was too good to be true, but Robin gave no signs that she didn't want to continue our relationship. That is, she didn't show any signs until the day I suggested that she go looking for an engagement ring. It was then that she informed me that after graduation, she was going to return to California and marry her childhood sweetheart, who was now in England on a Rhodes Scholarship. He knew all about me, and she knew all about the English girl he was living with. We realized that there was no way two healthy young people could go several years without sex, so we agreed to have an open relationship. It shouldn't affect us in any way, Rob, at least not right away, but of course, it did affect us, or me. Basically, it came down to the fact that I had just been ripped out of what I thought was a romantic relationship and put into a relationship with a buddy. The problem was that I just didn't like having fun with my friends. I needed more than just sex, and Robin and I gradually drifted apart. For months, almost to the day from the day Robin put an end to my romantic aspirations, she said to me, "You don't want to be here, do you?" I told her I didn't feel comfortable and explained why. "I'm sorry, love. I almost wish I didn't love Alex so much so I could be more of what you want. If it weren't for Alex, you'd be my man." "Thanks, I guess. So what are we going to do? Flip a coin to determine who stays and who goes?" "No need. I knew this day would come, and Mom says she hasn't rented out my room yet. She decided it was best to keep it for me, at least until I turn 40 or until she gives her grandchildren. So you're staying, and I'm leaving." "Friends always," she hugged me then asked, "Last night, please?" I'd been home for a week, and on Friday night, as I sat in my room working on an article I was supposed to turn in the following week, my mom called up the stairs, "Rob, there's someone here to see you." I went downstairs and found Mom talking to Helen. Mom looked at me and said, "I'll leave you two alone," and went into the kitchen. "Hi, Rob," Helen said. "Hi, Helen. How are you doing?" "SOSO, but I'm hoping things will get better." "Oh, Robin called me and told me you were back on the market and suggested that if I hurry, I could be first in line." "Why would you want to be first in line? Why would you want to be first in line at all? There wouldn't be any line if I hadn't been stupid. In fact, Robin would never have existed. I don't want to be in line, Rob. I just want to go back to where I belong." "Where you belong?" She raised her left hand and said, "I never gave you your ring back." She had my class ring on the ring finger of her left hand. "There's a party at Alice Johnson's house tonight. Do you want to take me with you?" At the party, she dangled the idea at me, and when I mentioned it, she said, "Just so everyone knows, I've claimed my rights, baby." I got you back, and I'm letting everyone know it. The big surprise came after the party. She was silent as I drove her home. She just sat there looking out the window on the passenger side. When I pulled up to her house, I asked, "Do you want to go apartment hunting with me on Saturday? An apartment will be much cheaper in the long run than permanent motels. Is that your way of asking if I want to move in with you?" Such a thought has crossed my mind. What time? Around 9? Good. You have a date. Helen and I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment about midway between Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti and turned the second bedroom into an office where we put Helen's computer desk and my desk. About a month after we moved in, Harry came home on a 30-day vacation, and he and Annabelle spent a lot of time with Helen and me. Harry and Annabelle seemed to get along great, so maybe I was wrong in my thoughts about her. When she left 3 weeks after Harry returned to duty, Annabelle showed up. Harry had gone to Iraq, and Annabelle decided that she wasn't going to wait for Harry's return to the base. She wasn't home for 2 weeks and lived with the guy she lived with when she went to see Harry in Norfolk. 3 weeks later, she was seen with a black guy she used to date, and rumors started up again about the orgies she was having at his apartment and the train rides she was throwing for his friends. I thought about talking to her, but Helen talked me out of it. She said it was none of our business, and as far as we knew, Harry and Annabelle had an open marriage. I've heard that in the service, it's not uncommon for both parties to agree that it's okay to play during a long separation. That doesn't sound like something Harry would agree to. So what are you going to do? Write and tell him? He worships the ground she walks on. He won't thank you for telling him he'll probably end up blaming you for being the one who ruined his life. Leave it to Rob. Harry returned from Afghanistan in time to be the best man at my wedding to Helen, and then he and Annabelle went to Norfolk, where he finished the last 9 months of his service. When he was discharged, he and Annabelle returned home, and he found work with a construction company as a heavy equipment operator. The next 2 years flew by, and the Marshalls, Harry and Annabelle, became frequent visitors to our home, and we would see them at least once every 2 weeks or so. Everything seemed to be fine between Harry and Annabelle, and there was no indication that she was cheating on Harry. I figured that was as good an explanation as any, and Helen's theory seemed to hold true when the company Harry worked for bid on and got a job laying a pipeline in Alaska. Conditions on and around the construction site were harsh, so Harry decided to leave Annabelle at home for the 4 months he would be away. Not a week later, Annabelle was seen in a motel room with Gary Mellows, the owner of the company Harry worked for, and after that, Gary's car was seen parked in Harry's driveway almost every night of the week. There were problems with the job in Alaska, and it was extended for another 2 months. Helen and Annabelle were seeing the same doctor, and it just so happened that Helen was in the doctor's office the day Annabelle got the bad news. She was 7 weeks pregnant, and Harry had been gone for a little over 3 months. Helen found out that 2 nurses who worked at the clinic had studied with us. They knew that she knew Annabelle and that she spent a lot of time around Annabelle. They asked her how she thought Harry would take the news. Patient confidentiality took a back seat to spreading dirt among friends. Helen thought for a minute and then said, "Harry will never know if I'm right in my assumptions. Annabelle will have an abortion, and it will all be over before Harry even gets home." It wasn't like that. Someone Helen wouldn't discourage had let Harry know what was going on. Harry flew home, rented a car, and parked on the next street over from his house until he saw Mello pull up to his driveway, park, and enter the house. He waited 15 minutes to give Gary and Annabelle time to get down to business and then entered the house with a digital camera at the ready and filmed the lovers in action. 15 minutes later, an ambulance responded to a 911 call, and Mello was taken to the hospital. The police arrived and were about to take Harry away until he showed them the pictures he had taken. The camera was a Canon Rebel, and Harry had it set to continuous, and the series showed Mello lunging at Harry. He may have just been trying to get to the camera and take it away from Harry, but given the way the series of shots turned out, Harry could tell that it was obvious he was being attacked and was only defending himself. The cops bought that and left. 20 minutes after the cops left, Annabelle came out on the porch with one suitcase and locked the door behind her. The divorce went off without a hitch, as did the lawsuit filed against Mello for alienation of affection. He also sued Mello for some sort of harassment, claiming that Mello only hired him to send him out of town and then move in with his wife. Mello could have settled out of court and avoided publicity, but he decided to fight, and as a result, everyone found out what he was doing with the employee's wife after sending him out of town for an extended period. The jury ruled in Harry's favor, and he was awarded $1.3 million after paying court costs and taxes. He was left with a little over $750,000. He paid off the house, put in an in-ground pool, and bought a new Ford F-350. Once the divorce was finalized, Annabelle disappeared from sight, and it was rumored that she had moved out of town. Mello had to sell some equipment and property to settle the lawsuit, and he lost a lot of business when some customers and potential buyers decided that someone who would do what he did to his employee's wife couldn't be trusted. Harry still had some money left, and he came to me to suggest that I start my own company and take over the business that Mello had lost. I would do the design, and Harry would do the construction. Helen and I talked it over, analyzed our finances, and decided to do it, and R&J Constructors was born as a partnership. We've made it work. Not only did we pick up many of the clients that left Mello's, but we beat him on several jobs. And human nature being what it is, Harry made sure everyone knew when we beat Mello's. The next 5 years flew by. Harry played the field but never found anyone he wanted to commit to forever. He spent a lot of time with me and Helen, and on average, we went out once a week with Harry and his girlfriend. Things were going great. Helen had moved up the ladder in her company, becoming a regional manager and a favorite for the vice president position. I didn't think things could get much better, and unfortunately, I was right. It was a Tuesday, and I was just finishing up a lunch meeting with a potential client when Gary Mello approached me and asked if he could buy me a drink. Personally, I had nothing against Gary. I believed that if a trashy girl like Annabelle offered it to a lonely guy like Gary, you couldn't blame him for accepting the gift. I never believed the story about Gary sending Harry out of town for Annabelle. I always knew Annabelle was a so. I figured Annabelle probably did something like go to Gary's office to pick up Harry's paycheck and let Gary know she was lonely because of Harry's absence. Anyway, his problems had to do with Harry, not me, so I took him up on his offer to buy me a drink. As soon as he sat down, he asked, "How's it going?" "Not bad, but it could be better," I replied. "Maybe you'll consider selling." "Selling? Why would I want to do that?" "To make your buddy Harry my partner." "Are you smoking some kind of crap?" "Not really. I don't want to be the one to do it, but take a look at this." He opened his briefcase, pulled out a folder, and held it out to me. I took it, opened it, and was stunned. The first thing I saw in the folder was a picture of Helen and Harry holding hands as they walked into the motel room. There were several more pictures of the two of them entering or leaving the motel room and a half dozen more of them in various places, kissing and hugging. I looked up at Gary, and he said, "Sorry." I was following him to get something on him to get back at him when the private investigator brought me those pictures. "I didn't know she was your wife. I knew from the rings on the pictures that she was someone else's." So, I put a private investigator on her to find out who she was, so I would have information when I started my revenge. "Why?" "You were guilty." "You did what he said." "No, I didn't." "Yes, I had an affair with his wife, but I never sent him out of town to get to her." She walked into my office, closed the door behind her, and began to undress. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "You sent Harry out of town, so you're going to have to take care of me until he gets back. I'm single, so I have to say no to Annabelle. As far as I'm concerned, this whole mess is Harry's fault. Initially, everyone knows Annabelle is and has been since high school. Harry should have known. But he didn't do anything about it. No, Rob, he screwed me with that lawsuit, and I'm going to get it back. I'm just sorry in the middle of this." Any idea how long this has been going on? The private investigator says, from what he's been able to find out, it's been at least a year, possibly more. How the hell could it have been going on that long, and I didn't find out about it? If she never did anything to make you suspicious, how could you find out? So, why do you want to buy me out? What do you gain by becoming Harry's partner? Think about it. As an equal partner, I have an equal say. He says we need to do A, and I say no, we need to do B. No matter what he wants, I will be 180 degrees off. Plus, I'll know what prices we're charging for the work, and I'll make sure the other company charges lower prices. I'll bankrupt the company, and Harry will lose his ass. But you will too. Not really. I've checked everything out. If the business fails, we'll sell off the assets, and I'll get most of my money back. I won't make any money, unless, of course, you count what I make from my other company when I underprice the jobs Harry is bidding on. But I won't lose much either. What if he decides to just stomp on your ass every morning to start your day fresh until you get bored and sell your half to him or someone else? Last time he caught me on top of his wife, and all I could think about was taking the camera away from him. He managed 3 good shots before it dawned on me that I should be defending myself, not worrying about that stupid camera. If he tries that again, he won't have it so easy. In fact, I'm pretty sure I can handle him if it comes to that. So, you are interested? Probably, but I want to do a little digging on my own first. If you decide, do you have an approximate amount you'd like to get? I gave him a figure, and he said it might be doable, and for me to give him a call if I decide to go for it. I left the meeting with Mellows in disarray. How the hell could Helen and Harry have been doing this behind my back for almost a year, and I hadn't had even the slightest suspicion? I had seen absolutely nothing to indicate that Helen was displeased with me. I saw no loss of affection. Our life was still wonderful, at least it seemed so to me. What had gone wrong? I had no reason to doubt Detective Gary's report and photos, but the photos could have been doctored, and Gary had his own agenda. I wanted to be absolutely sure before taking any action, so I went back to the office, called a friend who worked at an insurance agency, and asked him who they used to investigate suspicious cases. Armed with that information, I called, made an appointment, and 13 days later, I had confidence. On Wednesdays, when Harry supposedly traveled to job sites, he was actually meeting Helen at the Comfort Inn on Melrose. How she managed to get time off work for their meetings, I had no idea. All I had to do was decide what to do. I actually knew what I wanted to do, but I had to find a way to make it work. In 2 hours of working with a lawyer, I had a list of what I could and couldn't do, and a list of what I needed to do. We have no fault, so everything will have to be shared equally. I was concerned about her not getting a dime of what I made from the sale of my half of the company. Eventually, I had to admit that the only way to do that was to lie. Even so, she'd still get some of the money. I made a deal with Mello that I would sell him my share of the company on paper for 1/3 of what he actually paid. That third went into a bank account in my name only, the other 2/3 went into an offshore account I had set up. The deal was that he wouldn't show up at the office or occupy my desk until the morning I handed Helen and Harry the papers. Helen for divorce on grounds of adultery and Harry for alienation of affection. Even though we were in a no-fault state, I could still sue for adultery, and depending on which judge we drew, that could mean a split not 50-50ths, but slightly better for the adultery ground to be valid. I needed proof. An analysis of Gary's private investigators' reports and mine showed that every time they were under surveillance, they used the same motel, and it was always on a Wednesday. My detective had rented a room and set it up to record the activities, and a healthy bribe to the porter guaranteed that they would be put in that particular room. Wednesday morning, I called Maria, our receptionist, and asked her to tell Harry that I wouldn't be in that morning because of a dentist appointment and to tell him that if I'm not feeling well after my tooth extraction, I may not even show up in the afternoon. You got it, boss. If I were you, I'd go home and rest. I've never had a tooth pulled that didn't hurt when the effects of the mixing gas were off. I walked out of the house and back in after Helen left for work. The locksmith was there at 9, changing all the locks in the house. As soon as he was done, I went to the bank and cleaned out the accounts in the safe. My lawyer said to only take half, but my mood was stone cold. Screw you, Helen, and I wasn't going to do anything to make it easy for her. She would get her half eventually, but only after she had to fight for it. I also withdrew the money I thought I was getting from the business. If it was too much, Harry could go to court and try to get the money back, but while I had it, he didn't. My detective called me at 12:10 and informed me that the happy couple had arrived and were in room 1128. I drove up, had a few words with the detective, and then sat on the hood of the car parked in front of the suite and waited for them to come out. After the mini confrontation, I got in my car and drove off. As I was pulling away, a man got out of the car, walked over to them, and handed them the papers along with the divorce papers. Helen received a temporary restraining order prohibiting her from being within 500 feet of me in the house. To get it, I had to be a little devious. I had to lie and say that a third party had informed me that Harry and Helen had overheard them discussing how much insurance I had and wondering how much my share of the business was worth. There was a hearing pending on whether to make it permanent, but that could take a couple of weeks. It was just another way to mess with Helen. The main thing was that she couldn't enter the house without someone from the court present, and I wasn't about to make myself available to make keys for the new locks. Along with Harry's papers for the foreclosure attachment suit was a short note. It read, "You know how these suits work, don't you? How does it feel to be on the other end of one of them?" Driving away from the motel, I called Gary on his cell phone. "Everything's all set. Have a good first day at the office tomorrow." I drove to the airport, parked my car in the long-term parking lot, threw my cell phone in the glove compartment, and boarded the flight to Cabo San Lucas. I spent a week scuba diving and lying on the beach and then flew home. When I turned on my phone, it was flooded with voicemails. Not surprisingly, most of them were from Helen, but there were 4 from Harry as well. You'd think I was the last person he'd want to talk to. No matter. I wasn't interested in talking to him or Helen. Would I want an explanation? Of course, I'd want to know why, but I'd made the decision to put those 2 in the past and move on with my life. The reasons for their betrayal were not to occupy my thoughts. My lawyer knew I would be gone for a week, so I decided to call him and let him know I was back. He asked me to call Helen and let her know I was back. She called him twice a day, trying to contact me to get into the house and get my things. I was on the verge of telling him to call her and make arrangements with the court to let her into the house under supervision when a thought struck me, another way to mess with her. I called her and asked her what she needed. I need to get my clothes and other things, but I can't even get into the house with someone from the court because I don't have a key, and the court people won't let me break in. You don't have anything there to take away. I gave everything to Goodwill. I don't want anything of yours in the house to remind me of your lying, cheating ass. There's nothing of yours here anymore, not even a stray hair clip. Damn it, Rob. You had no right to do that. I had as much right to do it as you had to stab me in the back. We need to talk, Rob. It's not what you think. Be honest, Helen. I don't think you were having fun with Harry. I know that for a fact. Goodbye, Helen. I hung up the phone. All of her stuff was still in the house, but then again, I wanted to mess with her. Eventually, she would get her stuff, but it wouldn't be soon. I had always been on good terms with Maria, who was our receptionist, secretary, bookkeeper, head cook, and bottle washer. So, I called her and asked her how things were going. Not bad for me, but not so good for the company. Nothing is working out. Gary and Harry fight all the time over the most insignificant little things. Harry says to do something, and Gary replies that he doesn't need to do it. Harry calls and orders something, and as soon as Harry leaves the office, Gary calls and cancels the order. We have work that needs to be started, but it just stands there while Harry and Gary take care of it. I'm so sick of it that I tendered my resignation last Friday, but Gary said he'd double my salary if I stayed. So naturally, I'm not going to leave. They had a fistfight on Thursday, but there was no winner in it, although Harry did get a broken nose. Why did you leave us? Why did you sell out to Gary? I told her the whole story. She was quiet for a minute, and then she said, "Now I have another reason to stay." "And what's that?" "I can help Gary. I never liked Harry. He was always hitting on me, even though he knew I was engaged. He even hinted once that he'd let me go if I didn't go on a date with him. And we both know what he meant when he said go on a date. What did you say about him letting me go?" "And that shut him up." "You should have told me." "Why?" "It was a personal problem, and I dealt with it. I'm sorry for you and Helen, Rob, but there may be a silver lining to it, at least for me." "How's that?" "It means you're back on the market. How do you feel about being hunted?" "I thought you were engaged." "I was, until I caught that doing to me what he did to you, Helen." "When did that happen?" "About 3 weeks ago." "Well, honey, if you're worth it, I'll put your name at the top of the list when I start dating again, but that won't be for a while. I'm not going to give Helen anything she can use against me. I can wait, but keep me in mind if you get lonely and want some company for dinner." "I will, sweetie, and thank you." My phone rang 16 times that day, 14 from Helen and 2 from Harry. I couldn't think of anything that jerk could say that I would want to hear, and if he was calling to ask for something, it certainly wasn't from me. I deleted all the calls and headed home, cooked myself dinner, and then, out of a whim, I called Gary Mello and asked how his plan was working. Not bad at all. I made sure I was sitting at your desk when he got to work. He saw me and frowned, and then asked what the hell I was doing in the office and sitting at your desk. I laughed and told him I was his new partner. The look on his face was priceless. You could almost see the steam coming out of his ears as he read a copy of our agreement. I gave us a proper start almost immediately. He called for a fuel truck because the front-end loader and other equipment at the Wilkins site had run out of diesel fuel. As soon as he left the office, I called and canceled the order. One of the loaders ran out of fuel, and Harry called Allied and berated them. They told him that I canceled the order and that they had to put up with that kind of crap from him and to get fuel from someone else. That's when he came up to me and asked what the hell I was doing. I told him that Allied was charging us too much and that I was looking for a better price. And it went downhill from there. A little birdie told me you two got into a fistfight. Yes, it all ended last Thursday. And what came out of it? I guess I was a little optimistic when I told you I thought I could take him, but I got over it and heard him well. Carry on and good luck with your plan. Hanging up the phone, I went to the room I had converted to an office, turned on my computer, and started typing up my resume. I would begin my job search the next day. I was just typing on the keyboard when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and saw Harry standing there. "What the hell do you want?" "We need to talk, Rob." "No, you don't." "It's not my fault, Rob. She came after me. She caught me when I was in a really bad mood because of what Annabelle did to me. I wasn't thinking straight, Rob. I'm sorry, Rob, but it wasn't my fault. I didn't pursue her, but you knew she was my wife. You knew how you felt when you found out about Annabelle, and you didn't even stop for a second to think. You'd make me feel the same way, did you? You had to know I'd find out sooner or later, and probably the same way you found out about Annabelle. Someone told you. Well, somebody told me you're a douchebag. As far as I'm concerned, you're supposed to be my friend. And even if I believe Helen made a move on you, which I don't, you should have turned your back on her the same way I turned my back on Annabelle when she made a move on me. You knew you were better off, but you did it anyway. And even if it's true that she made a move and caught you when you weren't thinking straight, that doesn't justify the second, third, fourth, and however many times after that. No, you stuck a knife in my back, and there's no avoiding it. Why did you load me up with Mellows? Because in the mood I was in when I found out, and the rage I felt, if I'd come after you, I probably would have had things differently. And you're not worth going to jail over. Besides, sticking Mellows in will cause you grief that will last far longer than the aftermath of any beating. But you know what? The rage I felt at the time is gone. And that's when I hit him. I grabbed him by his shirt, dragged him into the house, slammed the door behind me, and stomped the hell out of him. He was unconscious when I dragged him out of the house and shoved him into the car. You wouldn't believe the smile I had when I got back in the house. I might have the police coming to see me, but I wasn't worried about that. All I had to do was say he attacked me and I defended myself, refer to his fight with Mello, and say he's mad at me because I sold my half of the business to Mello, and he's trying to make me pay for it. The next morning, I sent out 14 resumes and then called my attorney to see how things were going. He informed me that there would be a hearing on the temporary restraining order this coming Monday, but he had not received any communication from Helen or the attorney on her behalf. I contemplated calling Helen but decided against it. The more time that passed before she hired an attorney, the more time would pass before I had to communicate anything to her. Over the course of the week, I received several responses to the resumes I had sent out. I flew to Atlanta for an interview on Wednesday and ended up in Baltimore on Thursday. I liked both interviews, but I also heard back from a company in San Diego. I thought I might just like living in a place where it's almost always warm, so I called and scheduled an interview for the following Tuesday. On Monday, there was a hearing on the temporary restraining order, and to everyone's surprise, the judge found no reason to uphold it. I was ordered to allow Helen access to the house. Helen, of course, was at the hearing, and she had an attorney with her. She came over to me and started to say something. I stepped away from her and got my lawyer, then came back to her. "You don't say anything to me until my attorney is present," I said. "I just wanted to tell you I'm coming tonight," she replied. "No, you won't. I'm flying out for a job interview at 2:30 and won't be home until Wednesday. You can come by any time after 6. Her lawyer started to say something, but I interrupted him. "She will not, I repeat, will not be in this house unless I keep an eye on everything she does. There will be someone from the court there to keep an eye on things, and you can also have someone from your attorney there." "No, that won't work. They won't have a clue about what she's allowing herself. All they'll do is make a list, and if it's something she shouldn't have taken, I'll have to fight to get it back. She was out of the house for 2 weeks, and she survived. Another 48 hours won't destroy her," I argued. Her lawyer shook his head negatively and said, "Then I guess we'll have to see what the judge has to say," and turned to go back to the court clerk. But Helen stopped him. "Just drop it," she said. "I can wait another 48 hours. I looked at her and said, "Wednesday at 6, and turned to leave. "Hold on a second, Rob, can we talk then?" she asked. "No," I said, and walked out of the building. I thought the interview in San Diego had gone well and headed home, hoping to hear from them. Helen arrived at 6 with someone from her attorney's office. The woman from the courthouse arrived at 6:20, and we spent those 20 minutes drinking coffee and talking. She told me that her job was to observe for the court and take an inventory of the items seized. She would also make a list of the items in dispute, but I told her that wasn't necessary. "She can have whatever she wants," I said. "If you feel that way, why did you take such a hard stance against her?" she asked. "She stabbed me in the back, and she did it to someone who had been my best friend for over 25 years. I couldn't beat her up and destroy her, at least not if I wanted to avoid jail. But I had to do something to get back at her and make her suffer. It wasn't much, but at least it was something," I explained. Just then, the doorbell rang. I let Helen and the man who was with her from the lawyer's office in and went outside to cut the grass. When I finished and came back into the house, everyone was gone except Helen, and she was sitting at the kitchen table sipping tea. She looked up at me when I walked in. "You lied to me. You didn't give any of my stuff to Goodwill," she accused. "Maybe not, but I sure as hell liked the way you resented it when you said I had no right to do that. I didn't expect this to turn out to be all hers, and it's going to take me longer to figure it out than I expected," I replied. I pulled my key ring out of my pocket, removed my house key from it, and held it out to her across the table. "Don't bother moving. You can pick up the house on Friday. I'll have all my stuff out of here by then." "Why?" "I'm interviewing, and I'm going out of state as soon as I get a job." I mean, why did you do what you did if you were just going to give me the house and leave? Why the restraining order and the lies about giving away my stuff? That's a stupid question after what you did to me, she demanded. I had to do something to get back at you. Just be thankful that I decided to do it peacefully instead of violently. Just because I went down on you doesn't even come close to making us even, but it's the best thing I could have done without going to jail. I know you said no when I asked if we could talk tonight, but I'm still going to try to convince you that we don't need to divorce. Be serious, Helen. There's no way in hell we can stay together after what you've done, but that doesn't mean anything, Rob. I love you, and you know it. What happened with Harry was a mistake, just a stupid mistake. I like Harry, I've always liked him, but I don't love him, and I never have. I don't care if you loved him or not, you still had fun with him, and whether you loved him or not, it was still infidelity, and you shouldn't have any doubts about how I feel about that. All you have to do is remember how upset I was about what Annabelle was doing with Harry. I was so upset that I was going to tell him about it, but I let you talk me out of it. That should have told you how I would feel about you doing that to me. And don't give me crap like I didn't want you to find out. Cheaters always get caught. They always get caught sooner or later. Harry found out about Annabelle because someone saw her having fun with him and told him. That's the same way you got caught. Someone saw you and Harry go into the motel room and told me. Doesn't it matter that I love you? No, Helen, it doesn't, because it wasn't enough to keep you from cheating on me. But it didn't mean anything, Rob, honestly meant nothing. It was an accident. How could sex with the man who used to be my best friend be an accident? He stopped by our house when you were on a trip to Santa Fe, and he was in a bad mood about Annabelle. He really loved her, and despite cutting her out of his life, he missed her. We had a drink, and after a while, he started crying, and I took him in my arms and hugged him and tried to comfort him. I remember thinking, this is so wrong, I shouldn't be doing this, but it felt so good. But I'll be honest, it felt really good. The next time you went out of town, Harry stopped by, and we both knew what he was there for, and we got back into it. There was no love involved, Rob, as corny as it sounds, it was just sex, Rob, just a little excitement in my life. I never once neglected you while all of this was going on. I love you, Rob, I really do, and you know it. We can work through this, we don't need to get divorced. We has nothing to do with it, Helen. I need a divorce. I can't live with a man who betrayed me, it's simple, Helen, you betrayed me. If I left you, I'd be watching you like a hawk for the rest of my life, waiting for you to do it again. By your own admission, you kept doing it because you enjoyed the cheating so much. You can promise me all you want that you'll never do it again, but your promises aren't worth a spit. You already promised me to leave everyone else behind when we got married, and you broke that promise. I can't believe anything you say, Helen. Harry's story of how it happened isn't even close to yours. According to Harry, it didn't happen by accident. According to him, you were playing a game with him. He could be lying or you could be. The problem is, after what you both did, neither of you is trustworthy as far as I'm concerned, so I can't prefer one story over the other. The bottom line, Helen, is that we've broken up as a couple. I'm not giving up, Rob. I'm going to fight for the divorce. I know we'll get through this because we love each other. You're mad at me right now, and justifiably so, but I can make a promise to you and keep that promise, especially now that I see what breaking that promise could cost me. My lawyer says he can get the court to order counseling, and I know that can help. I love you, Rob, and I'm not letting you go. You can't seem to understand that I don't want you right now. Okay, I'll admit that I still love you, and it'll take me a while to get over it, but there's no way in hell I can't live with you again. Every time I go to bed with you, I'm going to think about you being with that jerk who was my best friend. I can't live like that. You won't fight for a divorce from Helen because if you do, I will release the videotape of your last meeting with Harry. Every family member, every friend, and all your coworkers will get a copy. I will create your own porn site for you, and there are dozens of amateur porn sites where I can post it. and I will do it with your full name and address. It'll make your life very interesting, Rob. No such video exists. Oh no, wait, here. I went to the den where I had my briefcase, pulled out a copy of the disc, went back to the kitchen, and handed it to her. Take a look at it. After you watch it, decide if you want someone else to watch it. Now, if you don't mind, there's something I need to do. You can pick up the house on Friday, but for now, you have to go. On Thursday and Friday, I moved out of the house and put most of my stuff in storage. Then I rented a room at the executive suites for a month, counting on having a job by the end of it. Over the next 2 weeks, I traveled to Salt Lake City, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Chicago, and Detroit for interviews, all of which I was happy with. But I didn't hear back from any of them. I sat down at my desk, figured out my finances, and decided I could live without a job for about 6 years. I started checking out other cities and states, looking for places with a lower cost of living, a cost of living that would allow me to stretch those 6 years to 8, maybe 10. Helen signed the divorce papers and returned them to my attorney. I almost regretted that she had done that. I would have loved to have a CD of her and Harry scattered all over the house. But a deal is a deal. I made an agreement. The agreement called for a 50-50 division of the property, with each party paying their own attorney fees. I was the only one who filed the suit, so I paid the legal fees. Helen said she wanted the house, and my half of the equity was a little more than the amount I had borrowed from the bank, so that was fine. True, I had to give Helen half of what I got from selling my half of the company, but I knew that would be the case and had made provision for it. She did swear that I sold out too cheaply, but it didn't matter because the other 2/3 of what I got from the sale was safely tucked away. An interesting thing came to me through the grapevine. It seems that as soon as I got myself out of sight, Harry started stalking Helen and was so persistent that she had to take out a restraining order on him. Not that I cared, of course, but I laughed about it. I decided to wait until the divorce was final before taking any steps. I finally started getting calls from some of the companies I was interviewing with. A company in San Diego called and asked me to come back and talk to them. But before I could call and arrange it, I got a call from Gary Mose. How would you like your company back? Why would I want my company back? I sold it to you so I could go back to Harry and get away from him. Why would I want to become his partner again? You wouldn't want to, but then you don't have to. After our last fight, I said if you're so damn unhappy with me as a partner, I'll buy you out or sell your half to someone else. He thought about it for about 30 seconds and then asked me how much I'd give for his half. He took half of what I gave you, and yet the question is why should I want her back if you've done even half of what you told me you were going to do to set Harry up? The company probably isn't worth that much anymore. You might be surprised. Come to the office and let's talk. I didn't think I had anything to lose, so I went to talk to him. When I walked in the door, Maria jumped up from her desk and hugged me, then poked her head through the office door and told Gary I had come. As you know, I only bought you out to screw Marshall. I didn't really need or use him, but things are changing. I'm getting more and more into the construction part of the business. I want to move away from the engineering aspect. On the one hand, I couldn't get what I wanted in terms of engineers, so I started thinking about what to do. The solution that came to my mind was to call you and ask you to set up a company that I would contract with to do the engineering work. But then Marshall sold me the company, and I thought, why not just sell you the company and contract with you? I can't afford to buy out my half and Harry's half. You won't have to pay that much because the company isn't worth that much anymore. Since I own the whole bunch, I've transferred all the construction work and construction equipment to my other company. All I'm leaving is purely the engineering part. I'll sell you the company for the amount I paid Harry and sign a 5-year contract for engineering services. Plus, the company still has contracts with about 15 other firms. I don't see how you can lose. How much did you give Harry? He told me, and it was less than I had in my offshore account. But there is one condition. And what's that? I have no secrets from Maria, and I voiced the idea to her. She said that if you agree, she will stay with you and not move to my company. If you agree to the deal, you will stay with her. I quickly made up my mind and assured him of my agreement to the deal. However, I made it clear that I wouldn't proceed until my divorce was finalized, which was still 3 weeks away at the earliest. Gary agreed without hesitation, and we sealed the deal. Just as I was leaving the office, Maria reminded me, "Remember, after those 3 weeks, you promised I'd be first on the list." "I didn't realize you were serious about that," I replied. "Rest assured, I am," she assured me, flashing a radiant smile. As I drove away, my phone rang, and it was my lawyer. Harry had evidently learned from Gary's lawsuit and had offered to settle the case. Without hesitation, I instructed my lawyer to accept the offer. Arriving at my room in the executive suites, I couldn't wipe the grin off my face. In 3 weeks, I could embark on a fresh start with a new job, a new partner, and money in the bank. I could spend those weeks house hunting and furnishing my new place. Who says nice guys finish last? Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more content.